She's probably here to mop the floors. That was what my son-in-law said when I walked into the rehearsal dinner at the Fairmont in downtown Vancouver. He didn't whisper it. He wanted me to hear it, and he wanted everyone at that table to hear it too. My daughter laughed. Not a polite, uncomfortable laugh. Not the kind you do when you don't know what else to say. She laughed the way you laugh when someone finally says out loud the thing you've been thinking for a long time. I set my gift down on the table, picked up my coat, and walked out into the November rain. I didn't cry until I got to my car. But I want to tell you something. That night, sitting in the parking garage on Burrard Street, watching the rain streak down my windshield, I made a decision that would change everything. Not just for me, for all of them. Let me go back to the beginning. Because you need to understand who I am before you can understand what I did. My name is Margaret. I'm 63 years old. I was born in Sudbury, Ontario, the youngest of 5 children. My father worked in the nickel mines. My mother cleaned houses for the families who lived on the good side of town. We were not poor exactly, but we were never comfortable. There was always a calculation happening at the dinner table, whether the hydro bill had been paid, whether we could afford new boots before the snow came. I understood money the way children from families like mine always do. Not as something to spend, as something to protect. When I was 19, I moved to Vancouver. I had $240, a duffel bag, and an address for a rooming house in East Van that a cousin had written down on a napkin. I got a job cleaning offices in the financial district within my first week. Night shifts. I would finish at 3 in the morning, take the bus home, sleep until noon, and start again. I was not ashamed of that work. I want to be very clear about that. I cleaned those offices with the same care I would have brought to anything else. I learned the buildings. I learned the routines. I talked to the security guards and the overnight staff and the people who came in early to get ahead of their day. One of those people was a man named Gerald, who managed investments for a small firm on Hastings Street. He was always there at 6 in the morning with terrible coffee and a stack of printed reports. One night I asked him what he was reading. He told me. And then, because I kept asking questions, he kept explaining. Over weeks, over months. He didn't talk down to me. He just talked, the way you talk to someone you respect. I opened my first investment account when I was 22. I put in $40. That was $1,983. I kept working as a cleaner. I cleaned office buildings. Then I took on a contract with a hotel in Yaletown, then 2 hotels. I started my own small cleaning company when I was in my late 20s. Nothing glamorous. 4 employees, then 8, then 12. I kept living simply. I kept investing. I never talked about money. There was no reason to. The work spoke for itself and the rest was private. My daughter, Claire, was born when I was 29. Her father and I were never married. He left before she was 2 years old. I raised her in a small apartment in Burnaby and later in a townhouse in Coquitlam that I bought when she was in elementary school. I drove a used Civic. I packed her lunches. I helped with her homework at the kitchen table after my shifts. Claire was bright. She was social. She knew how to walk into a room and make people pay attention to her. I was proud of that. I told her so. What I perhaps did not do well enough was make sure she understood where that ease came from and what it had cost. She went to UBC. I paid for it. I never told her exactly how, just that I had been saving. She assumed student loans had covered part of it. I didn't correct her. After university, she got a job in marketing at a tech company in Kitsilano. She was good at it. She moved into a condo in Yaletown with friends, then on her own. I saw her on Sundays when she remembered. She met Daniel 3 years ago at a charity gala for BC Children's Hospital. He came from money. Old money. The kind that had been accumulating in Vancouver real estate for 2 generations. His family owned several commercial properties in Richmond and a large home in West Vancouver. He wore suits that fit him the way suits fit people who have never had to think about whether they could afford them. He was polite to me the first time we met, politely dismissive. The kind of polite that is really just a more elegant form of condescension. He asked what I did, and when I said I ran a cleaning company, he nodded the way you nod when someone tells you something you consider irrelevant. He moved the conversation along. Claire watched this and said nothing. They got engaged after a year and a half. The wedding was set for the following October at a vineyard in the Okanagan. It was the kind of wedding that has a planner and a hashtag and a photographer who charges more per hour than I used to earn in a week. The venue alone cost $40,000. I was happy for her. I want you to know that. I set aside whatever unease I had about Daniel because Claire seemed happy, and I told myself that was enough. I started putting together her gift early. I had been thinking about it for years, actually, long before Daniel. I had opened a separate account when Claire turned 18, adding to it every year, letting it grow. I had never told her. I wanted to wait for the right moment. A wedding seemed like the right moment. The total, by that October, was just over $430,000. I printed the account summary from my online banking. I put it in a card with a note that I spent 3 evenings writing and rewriting. I wrapped it simply, the way I do everything, a small envelope inside a white card inside a modest gift bag. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the wedding. It was held at a private event space at the Fairmont Pacific Rim. Daniel's family had organized it. His mother sat at the head of the table in a cream blazer and pearls. His father talked about their property portfolio for 40 minutes. There were 12 people, and the bill, I later found out, was over $3,000. I came in from the cold with wet hair because I had taken transit. I had a gift bag in one hand and my good wool coat over my arm. I was wearing the nicest blouse I owned. That was when Daniel said what he said. "She's probably here to mop the floors." Claire laughed. I set the gift on the table near Claire's seat. I told her I would see her tomorrow. I kissed her on the cheek. She was still smiling from the joke. She barely registered that I was leaving. I walked to the elevator, rode it down to the lobby, walked out through the glass doors into the rain. In the car, I sat for a long time. I thought about my mother cleaning houses on the good side of Sudbury. I thought about the $40 I put into that first investment account 40 years ago. I thought about every holiday I didn't take, every piece of furniture I didn't buy, every version of a bigger life I had quietly declined in order to build something real. Then I took out my phone and I called my lawyer. Her name is Patricia, and she has been my lawyer for over 20 years. She answered on the third ring even though it was nearly 10 at night, because that is the kind of relationship we have. I told her what had happened. I told her what I wanted to do. She asked me if I was sure. I told her I had never been more sure of anything. We made an appointment for Monday morning. The wedding happened the next day. I went because she is my daughter, and I am her mother, and those two facts have never changed, no matter what has happened between us. I sat in the third row. I watched her walk down the aisle in a dress that cost more than my first car. She was beautiful. I cried. Because you do. At the reception, there was a moment when the gifts were being collected and one of the wedding party handed Claire the envelope. She opened it at the table. I watched her face as she read the account summary. She looked confused at first, then something shifted. She held it up slightly toward Daniel, who leaned over to look. He said something I couldn't hear. She said something back. Then she set the envelope aside and turned to speak to someone else. She did not come to find me. She did not come to say thank you. She did not mention it for the rest of the evening. When the dancing started, Daniel came over to where I was sitting alone with a glass of water. He sat down beside me. He smiled the way he always smiled, like he was doing you a favor. He said the account looked like a nice little nest egg. He said Claire had mentioned that I'd been putting money away for her for a while. He said it was thoughtful. He said, and these were his exact words, "Maybe we can use it for a renovation on the Yaletown place." I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, "That's not how the gift works." He raised his eyebrows. I excused myself and went to find my coat. I drove the 4 hours back to the lower mainland that night instead of staying over. The mountains were dark on both sides of the highway, and the sky was very clear, and I had the radio off the whole way. I thought better in silence. Monday morning, I was in Patricia's office at 9. The account, as I said, had $432,000 in it, but that account was one account. What I had never told Claire, what I had never told anyone, was that I had been building and running the cleaning company for 35 years, and at a certain point in the late 90s, I had begun using the revenue to buy property, quietly, strategically. The way Gerald had taught me to think about it, a long time ago in an office on Hastings Street, By 2024, I owned 7 commercial properties in the Lower Mainland. I had a majority stake in a property management company that handled contracts for 3 office towers in Burnaby. I had an investment portfolio that a financial advisor in Kerrisdale had been managing for 15 years. The cleaning company had been sold in 2019 for just over $2 million. I am not going to give you the exact number. That feels unnecessary. What I will tell you is that my total net worth, when Patricia had everything laid out in front of us on a Monday morning in October, was significantly more than $430,000. Patricia asked me again if I was sure. I told her to proceed. The first thing we did was restructure the gift. The $430,000 was held in trust. It would be accessible to Claire under specific conditions, which I will explain in a moment. It would not be accessible as a lump sum for renovations to a condo in Yaletown. The second thing I did was something I had been thinking about for several years. One of my commercial properties in New Westminster had been sitting underutilized for a long time. It was a former light industrial building, about 12,000 square feet, on a lot that was zoned for residential conversion. I had held it because the timing hadn't felt right. Now it felt right. I commissioned an architectural firm to draw up plans for a mixed-use building, 42 units. 20 of them designated as affordable housing under the BC Housing Program. The ground floor reserved for a small community services organization. I donated 10% of the total development cost to a women's shelter in the downtown east side. I didn't announce any of this. I just did it. About 6 weeks after the wedding, I received a call from Claire. She had been speaking to Daniel and they had questions about the trust account. They had seen a lawyer. Their lawyer had explained the conditions. She asked if we could meet. We met at a coffee shop in Burnaby. She came alone. That mattered to me. She sat down and for a moment she just looked at her coffee. Then she asked me why I had done it this way. I told her I wanted the money to be hers, not theirs, hers. Accessible for her education, her professional development, the purchase of a home in her name, or her financial security if she ever needed it, not for a renovation, not for a joint investment managed by someone else. She was quiet for a while. Then she said she didn't know I had that kind of money. I told her I had never thought it was relevant to tell her. I told her I had raised her to understand that work had value regardless of what it paid, and that what I did for a living had never been the most important thing about me. I told her that the man she married had made it clear in front of his family that he thought otherwise, and that I had chosen to respond not with anger, but with clarity. She didn't say anything for a long time. I told her I loved her. I told her that was not the question. The question was whether she understood what had happened that night at the Fairmont and whether she thought it was acceptable. She started to cry. Not the performative kind, the quiet kind that comes from somewhere real. She said she was sorry. She said she had been embarrassed and she had made the wrong choice and she was sorry. I reached across the table and I held her hand. I told her that sorry was a starting point, that we had time, that I wasn't going anywhere. What happened after that between Claire and Daniel is their business, not mine. What I will tell you is that she called me more after that meeting. We had Sunday dinners again. We talked the way we used to talk when she was in high school, and it was just the two of us at the kitchen table and the world felt manageable. The new Westminster building broke ground in the spring. I was there on the first morning. It was early and cold and the Fraser River was flat and gray in the distance. One of the construction crew asked me if I was with the development team. I told him I was. He handed me a hard hat and I put it on. I have cleaned floors in this city for decades. I have watched it change and grow and price people out and hollow itself out and slowly try to come back to something. I know what it means to live here without a safety net. I know what it costs to stay. The 42 units will be ready next year. 20 of them will go to families who earn less than $80,000 a year. There's a waiting list already. My mother cleaned houses her whole life. She never owned anything. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because it's the truth. And the truth is that she handed me something anyway. She handed me her work ethic and her dignity and her absolute refusal to let what other people thought of her determine what she thought of herself. Daniel's comment at the rehearsal dinner didn't wound me the way he expected it to. It clarified things. It reminded me of what I had always known. That the value of a person has never lived in the title on their business card, or the label in their coat, or the table they're seated at. It lives in what they build. in what they protect, in what they leave behind. I built something. It took 40 years, and it was quiet, and it was mine. And when the moment came, I let it speak for itself. Before I go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better? Have you ever stood in a room where someone decided your worth before you'd said a single word? Leave your answer in the comments below. I read every one. And if this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. There's someone in your life who has been carrying more than people know. Maybe this will remind them that what they've built has value, even when no one else can see it yet. Thank you for being here.